back in session. Madam Clerk, item number 27.
Item 27 is from Code Compliance, to introduce and waive reading of the ordinance superseding and replacing the current Chapter 8.06 of the Calaveras County Code, Public Abatement Property Maintenance Code.
Good afternoon, Board and Chair. I want to be proudly to present this new revised or repealed 8.06. It incorporates a lot of things, lessons learned from last year, and we believe that the items that we put in here will allow us to be more effective and efficiently, and we're going to outline these very quickly, and then if you have any questions or answers, any feedback, we'll go right from there. And that's, I'm going to introduce Sabrina again. Remember Sabrina, Senior Code Enforcement Officer, and Ethan, okay?
Good evening, Board. Thank you for listening to us tonight. We'll do a brief presentation and then get right into questions. So the current Chapter 806 was adopted in February of 2017. The County Office of Administrative Hearings was established, which expedited cannabis-related case review, and we saw a significant increase in efficacy and efficiency in cannabis-related cases. General code enforcement cases, if appealed, are heard by the Administrative Hearing Board and then go to the Board of Supervisors. If a case is not appealed, then abatement must be authorized by the Board of Supervisors. Where a citation and order is not appealed, authorization for abatement usually goes on the Board's consent agenda. You saw that earlier today. 50 days from the issuance of a citation to actual abatement. So in the updated 806, requirements and procedures are clarified. The language is straightforward and practical and provides transparency and accessibility to constituents, making code enforcement procedures easier to understand. Courtesy letter is implemented, which provides education to violators who might not otherwise know they are in violation of county code. Non-punitive resolution for violators making reasonable efforts to apply, and it allows staff to work with community members who may need additional time and assistance to comply. And by policy, our department will notify the district supervisor when a courtesy letter is issued in their district. The updated 806 also transfers all code enforcement appeals from the Administrative Hearing Board to the County of Administrative Hearings. This eliminates the complicated dual-track approach which we've been doing for the last year. Health and safety issues can be addressed more expeditiously, and more cases will be investigated, and more non-cannabis abatement warrants executed. It also implements a fee structure, such as case management, inspection, and appeal fees, which we have not had in our department. This allows for near full cost recovery, and code compliance has the potential to become a general fund independent department. It also implements new fine collection tools, such as recording notices of violation against properties, withholding permits on properties that have outstanding violations until they are addressed and the fines are paid. And there's an even greater potential for code compliance to become a self-sustaining department. Adoption of the proposed ordinance will allow staff the opportunity to increase efficiency and effectiveness and enforcement actions while providing alternatives to citizens in need of lenity and leniency. That's all. Any questions, Board?
Board, any questions?
Do you want to get into the meat and potatoes of the actual ordinance? I really appreciate the concept of Track It. I think that will really help the whole process for everyone across the board in all various departments that will be attached. The one that I'd like to see added as a definition is odors. We didn't discuss odors in this 806 at all. And I think that there needs to be something in there that speaks to it. And I had talked about that quite a number of months ago, that the state of Washington is literally light years ahead of the state of California when it comes to odors. And I'm not talking, let's step away from the cannabis conversation and make this a nuisance code conversation. Odors could be emanating from any kind of source, and what then becomes an issue? If you're going to move into an agricultural area, you're expected to smell agricultural products, but at the same time, in a residential environment of 5-acre, 1-acre parcels, what becomes an obnoxious odor there might be very different from somebody who's living on a 20-acre parcel. So I'll leave you to decide how that all works, but I think there needs to be something in here in the conversation about it.
I suppose in part, an odor is addressed when we talk about, if you'd like a specific definition, we can have it in
Correct.
there.
Correct.
I can certainly find one. We do discuss the definition of nuisance as it's defined in the civil code, which is any kind of nuisance based on common law and case law, and I think noxious odors would probably be encompassed by that. But we can certainly put in a specific definition, and I'm sure I can find one in another jurisdiction's statute.
Okay. And the rest of it, I'll just wait until public comment and see what they can pick up. I've got some other ideas, but
Thank you guys very much for the document. Seems very complete, and I think it's appropriate. I do have a couple of questions, specifically at page 26 in the one that was online. It's pretty direct. I mean, there's no two ways about how it's going to deal with illegal cannabis. I want to make sure that we're not violating anybody's due process, because this is, I mean, it's on it, and there's nothing wrong with it. I just want to make sure we're on legal good standing, that we're not violating anybody's right to due process and anything in there, because it's you see it, you cut it. I want to make sure we're okay. So you want to give me some comfort?
Well, we don't exactly have a we see it, we cut it situation here. We provide individuals with a notice of violation in order to show cause. And I think we've made adequate findings to justify why we do it that way. And in 2016, as we've discussed, we issued a lot of notices of violation and did, I believe, one abatement. And so the outstanding need for an expedited process that's tailored to the unique concerns surrounding cannabis is certainly warranted. And this is a method that was actually pioneered in Tehama County with the order of the show cause model that automatically sets hearings, and then it has been copied around the state. And I'm in contact with numerous county councils in many jurisdictions who've been asking us questions about how we do it. It's been adapted in San Benito County, Mendocino County, and many other counties at this point, Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo.
And I'm not going to argue. I mean, illegal is illegal. I just want to make sure. Has it been tested in court yet? I'm sure somebody's going to challenge it. Madera County?
Yeah, well, Madera has actually, they treat every cannabis cultivation site as a summary abatement. They regard cannabis in and of itself as a public threat, and they do summary abatements automatically. That's their approach to cannabis. They don't give a reasonable opportunity to correct, and there's no hearing until after the abatement has occurred.
There's not a courtesy notice on a cannabis abatement after we get in that later section, I'm assuming.
That would be in the discretion of the code.
There's nothing that prohibits it.
Nothing that prohibits.
A courtesy notice. It can certainly be issued for less extreme cannabis cases.
I mean,
Let's say someone's growing 2 over their 6 plants. I'd issue a courtesy notice.
Right.
But if you're talking a massive commercial,
Yeah,
like
2,000 over
yeah,
the 2,
correct.
yeah.
We'd go straight to notice of violation and citation on that. And the
Okay.
summary abatement, which is immediate abatement, that's going to be in extreme cases of environmental harm and
Right. I liked how you
on
laid
page
that out.
27.
yeah, and in discussing that if the board would like to discuss that provision, we can certainly do so. I mean, and in discussing it internally, I think there's only been a couple of code cases that we thought that would actually warrant that. Most scenarios that involve imminent threats are the purview of the sheriff's department.
I appreciate the courtesy. I mean, there'll be somebody who'll grow 2 plants over, and we've got 2,000 plants next door to them.
That's right.
It's a
And
priority question.
again, it's just about education.
Okay. Thank you.
A lot of people don't know,
Any other board comments, questions? No? We'll open to public comments.
Bill McManus. A few meetings ago, I addressed the board and brought up the subject of enthusiasm about getting some of this done, that we can kind of shuffle around and say, yeah, we're going to get to it. Yeah, we've got ordinances that allow us to do this, that, or the other. But without that enthusiasm, it's not going to happen very quickly. If it doesn't happen quickly, it'll never get completed. So I'd like to thank all those who put work into this revision of 806. I know it's a broad ordinance covering all sorts of nuisances. I find it interesting, too, that marijuana has a special section. It is a unique kind of nuisance. And I want to thank Supervisor Mills for bringing up the topic of odor. And I would direct your attention to 8.06.710, paragraph A. And in the first sentence, it says, while the cultivation of cannabis alone does not pose an immediate threat to public health and safety, comma. Now, to me, this part of the statement should not be there. The way I read that is, with the long list of things that are wrong with cannabis, this is saying, you know, on its own, it's not really bad. And to me, this kind of sets up maybe a circumstance where people will go back through it and say, you know, the county said it's not that bad by itself. If none of the other conditions exist, by itself, it's not bad. I disagree with that, and I disagree with it because of the reason that Supervisor Mills articulated. The odor that goes with it is unique to the growing, to the cultivation. It happens every time. You know, it's not something that's here and there. This is one of the nuisances that exist just with cultivation. And so I would suggest that starting with the word while, that you strike that language all the way up to the comma. And then after that, strike the word other. Continue on, and everything else in this ordinance looks to be, you know, right on the money. I hope this will provide a reason for people to be enthusiastic about doing this. It'll help them maintain that enthusiasm as time progresses. And I think that enthusiasm is what we were missing before, and hopefully we can reclaim that now. And this ordinance says it's okay to be enthusiastic. Thank you.
Hello again, I'm here, Antoinette Rambo, and I'm concerned about the code compliances. Years ago, when we owned properties in Calaveras County, we used to get notices. I'm talking maybe 25 years ago, 15 years ago. We had to clean our empty lots. Otherwise, somebody cleaned them for us, and we were charged $1,300, $1,400 if we didn't do it. So we did, and we owned numerous lots. Now we have this marijuana thing. We have litter. We have the drying out of the tall grasses and weeds and stuff. Who's in charge of all these code compliances? Because when I call, they revert. You have to call 5 different agencies, and nobody comes out. Like I said earlier, I took care of my culvert. That's county property, but I do it. It's unsightly. Plus, it's a hazard. Someone's going to the lake. They flick a cigarette. You know, I'm on fire. You know, I didn't want that. Now, right now, I'm just trying to find out who owns that lot that they put up for sale, and the other lot, I don't know who owns it. I have to find out again, and go all around and put a fire break, okay? I also know, and I gotta say something about the marijuana thing. There's lots of people selling their homes and can't sell their homes because marijuana grows right next to them, or they're buying property and, you know, they're selling to somebody who wants to put marijuana on their properties, and they don't feel that's right to do that to their neighbors, you know, the existing neighbors that they've had made friends with over the years. So, you know, they feel responsible. Again, some of that stuff has gone into the ground, in the litter and the things that have made the ground toxic. And yes, when we have a heavy dew in the morning, you can drive through Rancho Baldwin, Harvickson, and you can smell it. It's in the air, you know. And I'm not going to try to pretend that we can hold our breaths like President Clinton in the past said. He didn't inhale. I mean, you know, if you're breathing, you know, and it's out there. So, you know, we really got to think. Are we really enforcing codes of all kinds for all problems? And are we coming up with solutions and remedies for everything? Who do we call, and are they stepping up? You're our county representatives and departments, and I think you guys really should pay attention to these things. We don't want another fire season like we've had in the past. Thank you.
Good evening. Jed Richardson, Realtor with JPM Realty, and former engineering project manager with Clorox and Nestle, where I consulted for 30 years. The Building Code Chapter 8.06 replacement language under consideration today while attempting to address the real need of code violations by illegal cannabis growers creates an undue and unnecessary burden on the citizens of this county by imposing draconian penalties which all of us could face. Namely, it specifies that any notice of violation against a property owner for any code violation, no matter how small, will be recorded and stay with the title of that property in perpetuity. There is no provision in the language for recording that the violation has been corrected. Thus, the notice of violation will be called to the attention of any future property buyer, lender, or title insurance company. The immediate consequence of this action, however, is potentially more dire. The bank or other mortgage holder who will be notified by the county of the notice of violation under the provisions of this procedure, under typical mortgage lending language, may have the option of calling the loan due upon receipt of this notice, placing the homeowner in jeopardy of losing their home. Again, I am not speaking about cannabis cultivation properties only, but all properties within the county. This is especially unsettling since new code has been recently created without fully considering the consequences and validity of the change and applied retroactively to existing installations. Typically, when building codes and standards change, which affect the majority of the population, there is some sort of oversight and public comment. This has not happened, much to the distress of the county's building trade. In other jurisdictions, when codes change, existing installations are grandfathered unless they are renovated extensively. Obviously, we cannot hold people responsible for predicting the future. A simple example of a recent code change, perhaps based on good intention, but a good example of a solution seeking a problem, is the requirement that shipping containers be placed on a permanent foundation and seismically braced and anchored. I'm sure all of us in this room can think of a property which has a shipping container being used for storage. I understand there's about 8 of them on this campus. And I would venture to guess that none of these meet the current requirements. If the violation is not corrected, these properties are all subject to a notice of violation, recorded permanently against the property, notification of their mortgage lender, and a $100 a day fine. I urge the board to send the current Chapter 8.06 replacement language back for revision, and that realtors and building trade be consulted so that our county's economic growth is not stifled in an attempt to fast-track a policy change to deal with illegal cannabis cultivation. Thank you.
Good evening. Just a few minutes ago it was good morning. I concur with the previous speaker. This should go through a little bit more of a study process. Maybe a workshop and invite the people that are involved with real estate, perhaps the Association of Realtors, and title companies. The title companies have a lot of interest in what happens on property, especially things that are recorded, and then of course bankers as well, and go through this, perhaps correcting the things that have already been problems, and maybe find other ones that could be nipped in the bud so we don't create something that's going to do more harm than good.
So the proposed language of the new 806 is pretty transparent. Quote, whereas 5 full-time equivalent positions were funded through the Cannabis Fee Fund and the termination of the regulatory program has required the Code Compliance Unit to establish alternative funding sources to continue to carry out its mission at the same level of effectiveness, end quote. So, using funding generated by UO registration fees, code compliance staff were hired to meet the increased demands of enforcing the UO. Now this board's enacted a ban. The UO is terminated. You're voting on amending 806 to fund the level of staffing formerly necessitated by the UO. And while I strenuously disagree with this, some board members, department heads, many ban proponents, staff from county council, maintain growers operating under the UO knew the program was temporary in nature, had no reasonable expectation to continue operating after it ended. So, county staff and the board claim the program's temporary in nature, and therefore it's reasonable to expect all of us to fire our staff, go out of business, forfeit our investments and our livelihoods. And yet some of the same staff and department heads and supervisors appear to expect to maintain the positions and payroll of the new hires made to meet the demands of an ordinance that you maintain was temporary in nature. It's an impressive double standard. Lastly, and most importantly, in the name of making a department self-funding through collection of fines, this ordinance compels staff to tirelessly look for opportunities to penalize citizens as if their jobs depend on it, because they will. That's not the kind of county I want to be a part of, but don't get too happy. I'm not going anywhere. Thanks.
Bill Wilson. Good evening. So, code compliance now has to fund itself because we didn't want fees, we didn't want regulation, we wanted to ban cannabis, and we want to now make those 1,000 illegal grows that you knew were here, we want to make code compliance responsible for them to go out, enforce a new ordinance that says, well, you can't do that anymore. And they have to pay their own salary. So, just like the previous speaker, they're going to start having to come up with quotas. How close can you park your boat to a creek? How close can you store your cars and other stuff? There's property around ours. People have cars less than 10 feet from a creek that flows into a pond. They were out there mudding in their four-wheel drive on their property. That water goes down. It ends up in Hogan Dam, I believe. Comes right off that property. Stores construction equipment and other items within 20 feet of a waterway. Code compliance? Have they been out there? Have they done anything? It's been over a year. Those vehicles are still sitting there, rusting. Same on Pool Station. That water ends up in Hogan. Right there on Pool Station, guy has a, looks like now, a used boat lot. Car lot, truck lot, creek runs right through the middle of it. That's just runoff water, right? We don't care. But we need to make sure that marijuana doesn't smell. Let's add an extra chapter in there just for the smell. How about horse manure? How about dairies? You move into next to a dairy, do you expect that guy to stop his cows from excreting that smell? How about a chicken ranch? Move next to a chicken ranch. How about a pig farm? Clyde, you had one. They wouldn't let you have one in your neighborhood because it smelled. It smells. Sometimes you gentlemen just surprise me when you come up with new ways to try to make money while you throw away more money.
Any other public comments?
Jason Campbell, District 5. I'd like to talk about selective enforcement today. You guys We're not fooling anybody here. This 8.06 is all about cannabis. We want to talk about other code violations we're going to deal with. You guys aren't. This is all for cannabis sites. You guys automatically assume we're all guilty until proven innocent. You want to come in and get administrative warrants so that you can search our unpermitted structures because you think we got something to hide. You can't accept the fact that we're telling the truth, ever. So with that being said, I'd also like to talk about the board rules and procedures. And I would like to read Rule 47.
We're talking about this 806 right now.
Okay.
We have public comment after, so.
Okay, I'll wait on that one. I will stay for that, thank you. I mean, I guess I could call point of order on it because it does have to do with rules and procedures of the way that things operate in here. So I can finish up this time and I'll sit down and call point of order or wait, whichever you prefer, that's fine with me. So, like I was saying, this whole thing, selective enforcement. Are you guys really going to actively look for code violations other than cannabis sites? Are you just going to take the list and you're going to go after everybody that's on that list? Are you going to show up at any of the illegal sites that you know about? I've been told this whole entire program is going to be complaint driven, selective enforcement. I don't think that's right. We've heard all day long about how people need to follow the rules, follow the regulations, follow the laws. They need to be enforced evenly across the board. Thank you.
Dr. Prapana Smith, District 3. I'd like to ask the same question. Is this going to be selective enforcement? Are you going to go and cite Mr. McManus's junkyard in his backyard? I've seen it. It's a mess. You're going to allow at least 700 illegal growers out there while you shut down people like me? I think you're talking about selective enforcement here. I think the term draconian on this particular thing is quite accurate. And I know he doesn't want me to speak because he never does. So the question is, are you going to enforce this across the board, or is this only going after a select group? Because after you shut me down and you fail to shut down all the illegal people, a grievous travesty of justice will have taken place. You're kicking out the good guys, you're inviting in the bad guys, and you're letting your political friends have all kinds of stuff on their properties. If it's complaint driven, this is going to be really interesting. Imagine all the complaints are going to come in about every car, every piece of agricultural machinery that's been sitting there forever, weeds. This is going to get really interesting.
Point of order.
Silence is golden.
May I take the podium?
What time, does he have time left? He has time left, you'll have to wait till his time.
Let the record show that the man that has come in here and has cast aspersions across the board towards people he doesn't know has taken offense that someone's pointed out that he has a crappy backyard.
You need to,
Let the record show that this situation is really unjust and wrong. It's nasty, it's mean. You guys are amazing. Amazing.
Mr. McManus.
I would like to remind the chair that I am not on the agenda. And for people to come to the podium and make comments about me personally, they're welcome to make those comments to me outside or any other place. Doing that in a board meeting is not right. I know, Mr. Garamendi, you seem to be smiling. You probably think it's funny. I don't. I am not on the agenda. And allowing that, and the chairman knows that I'm not on the agenda, but how do we unring the bell at this point when someone is allowed to continue on and on and on again doing the same thing? So I'm glad you're happy, Mr. Garamendi. I'm not. Thank you. That's my point of order.
Chair, are you willing to hear my point of order, or would you like me to wait until public comment?
Your point of order?
Yeah. So, as I stated earlier, point of order, selective enforcement, and in the interest of transparency, honesty, fairness, I get nervous up here, I'm sorry, I forgot a couple of the others there, but I'd like to read Rule 47. The board has the power to implement security measures in the board chambers and in alternate locations where the board may meet. Signs, posters, banners, or other hazardous objects which could impair the safety of individuals in the event of an emergency may be prohibited. Any large object, container, that may be deemed as a hazardous object which could impair the safety of individuals in the event of an emergency may be also prohibited. All permitted items shall be placed at the direction of the board chair or board chair's designee. So, I'd like to shed some light on what happened earlier in the meeting today.
You gave a point of order, so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm explaining my point of order now. My point of order is exactly that rule, and the ruling that you came to me specifically pointed me out and asked me to leave the room with the sign that I had. And your explanation was that it was political. It had nothing to do with safety. If it was a safety issue, I completely agree with that. If it is a safety issue, let's, as a board chair, gain some control of the room, stop the selective enforcement, and enforce the rules evenly across the board. We've seen signs in here today. We've seen other people bring guitars in here. We've all kinds of different stuff. So what you did was stomp all over my freedoms of speech and expression. Unfairly, because you do not have control of the boardroom and you do not enforce the rules evenly across the board. There has been, are we allowed to clap in here? There's been multiple clapping occasions today. You do not have control of this boardroom. Thank you.
Thank you for your point of order and explanation. Thank you. Any other public comment on this issue?
Point of order.
On this issue?
Oh, well, I can't do public comment. I'm just wondering, when you label something political, isn't that an express violation of his First Amendment rights?
Thank you.
It says nowhere in Rule 47.
Thank you so much. I'm going to gain control right now, okay? I've heard your point of order. Thank you, okay?
Can I have a ruling, please?
I will go forward from here. I don't have to give you a ruling at this, read the document. I don't have to give you a ruling, okay? We're going to move forward. We're going to move forward. We're going to move forward right now, okay?
Awesome.
lack of control. I've allowed your side to talk about marijuana and Measure C and millions of dollars when it didn't even pertain to the items. So you guys talk about not being fair. That's not completely true. And yes, I've allowed some clapping in here today. Yes, I have, on both sides, not just one side. So, and it was started on the other side. So it's not that I'm trying to be fair to everybody. So thank you. I've ruled on it. Move on. Other public comments on this issue.
Good evening, gentlemen. As you know, Joan Wilson, District 1. It's getting late. Code compliance. Your people were very nice when you came out to my place. Thank you. Wow. 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 I paid my money, my hard-earned money. I paid my money to this county. I paid the taxes. And why did I do that? I did that because there's a sheriff that says he wants to keep this place safe. This place, he wants to keep us safe. I paid.
Where'd she go? Point of order, should we stop? Order. You don't have control of the board. I don't know. You just let them wander off. Again, ridiculous. Unbelievable.
He is an elected official. I cannot stop him.
He's on the clock. He's on our time. Yeah.
That, you deal with him on that, not me.
Well, you just hitched your wagon.
Yeah, we're going to take a 5-minute break, a 10-minute break, please. We're going to clear the room. Thank you. All right, we're back in session. Ms. Wilson, you still have time remaining.
Thank you. As I said, you guys were really nice. And you know what? Budgets are being cut all over this county, and I'm sorry if yours is being cut. I understand they are pressuring you to kind of pay for yourselves. Part of me wants to say, oh, gosh, too bad. Somebody's going to lose their job. And maybe that's the right thing to do. Maybe this just has to be hard on all of us. Like I started to say, I paid my money. I paid my hard-earned money. I jumped through your hoops. Maybe it wasn't your individual hoops. You're the government. I jumped through the government's hoops. I did it right. Code compliance came out to my place, and it was okay. When this government gets rid of the 700, the 1,000, the 2,000, I don't know, I've heard all kinds of numbers. When you guys get rid of the illegal, dirty pot growers out there, when you get rid of the ones that weren't willing to do it right, then start this.
Bonnie Newman from Double Springs. Now I'm trying to understand, is this 8.06 an abatement based on smells? Is that what this is? I mean, how come all this stuff about smells is coming in? I'm not understanding what the purpose of this is, because I heard a lot about the odor. It's the odor, and anyway, there's a lot of stinky stuff. cigarette smoke is really stinky. People will go have a cigarette, get nicotine, oily, dirty nicotine all over their hands. They'll come in here and touch this, and then it stinks. They breathe, and their breath stinks. Can we outlaw stinking cigarettes too, if this has anything to do with smells? Thank you for your time.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comments. We'll bring it back to the staff. Staff, you want to answer some of the questions that were asked?
I'll address a point that Mr. Richardson brought up regarding the recording of a notice of violation. In section 806.413C, it talks about how we will record a release of notice of violation once all the violations have been corrected or abated and all fines, fees, and costs of abatement have been paid. So it will not remain recorded against the property.
I'd also follow up on that by saying that an individual, before a notice of violation is recorded, has an opportunity to appeal code enforcement's finding that a violation exists on the property, and that they would have every opportunity to contest that finding, so they have notice and opportunity to be heard and are provided full due process prior to that occurring on their property. And as Sabrina indicated, once they come into compliance with the code, that is removed.
Mr. Mills, your light's on.
Yes, staff, I want to really thank you for hearing what I was saying months and months and months ago about establishing a comprehensive approach, because this does fit within that realm. To say that you are selectively enforcing in my district is an absolute lie. There are many, many places that we are now working together with property owners, with civic organizations and faith-based organizations to help people to get into compliance. And we're not asking, in some cases, for immediate response. And the courtesy visits are an important piece of this. I want to be sure that we, though, handle immediate threats such as raw sewage running down the street or whatever might be an immediate threat in an appropriate way, in an immediate fashion. Where it's not an immediate threat, we don't need to be stepping into that. And I appreciate the thought that, you know, if you're a couple plants over the limit, for instance, on cannabis, or that you have one too many cars in your yard, that somehow that puts you in a realm with junkyard. I'm not even thinking that I see that here unless I'm seeing something wrong. Somebody brought up an interesting point about lot clearing. I don't remember seeing a whole lot in the code about clearing lots. And I know there's certain fire districts that are very proactive within their realm of handling weeds and tall grasses, et cetera.
I believe elsewhere in the code, fire hazards are addressed, and also that's regulated by the CAL FIRE as well.
Correct.
And
so,
if I may, it also occurs to me that there's one more point that I would like to address, if you don't mind, Mr. Miller.
That's quite all right.
The members of the audience addressed or brought up the concern that there was going to be a quota system, or that this situation will incentivize code enforcement to raise revenue by penalizing people. Well, code enforcement has always been funded by abatements. It just happened to be that over the last 2 years, we got other people who were funded through the fee fund. But prior to that, it was two guys. Their entire salaries were paid by code abatements. That's how they made their money. And this structure of fees is part of an overall change to the way the building department is being run, thanks to Ed's leadership. He's done fee studies and will bring those fees to the board, and is trying to make the entire building department, not just code enforcement, totally self-funded. This is part of an overall change of the building department that's occurring under Ed's leadership. And these fee systems are not based on the idea that we're going to suddenly fund ourselves by penalizing people. Many other jurisdictions force property owners whose properties are in violation to pay for code enforcement activity. I mean, that's not unheard of idea, and in fact, it seems fair to me. And that's all I have on that point.
Well, to your point, though, when you're, I'm coming to your office, as I did recently, to get a roofing permit. 2 trips. They knew how much those 2 trips were going to cost, and I paid for those trips. This is no different. It's when someone is doing something where it requires a courtesy, it's still a cost to somebody to go out there and provide that courtesy trip. So I think you've done a reasonable job of trying to figure out how do we get true cost recovery for the entire comprehensive package of nuisances and not specifically a type of nuisance. And that's really where this has got to go. We did have a constituent come up to us about shipping containers, and I heard that in the audience today, is that I'm sure for dry storage it's one thing, but where you're adding power or water or a place to sleep or whatever you want to call it, you're suddenly falling into a different realm. Is that the way you're going to approach it?
Yeah, the shipping container issue is not anything new. As we were out there enforcing certain sites, there were shipping container uses going way beyond that normal. Some were used for storage for lithium battery storage. There's explosive, hazardous material, all kinds of things that create safety issues. So at that point, our zoning code is silent on that right now. Other surrounding jurisdictions like Amador has a zoning, and so it comes down to the uses that are very extreme. So with that said, basically the building code, and I have the section code here I can probably give out to the public if they want. If it comes down just to the building code, it's section 105.5. It exempts certain types of permits. Anything greater than 120 square feet of an accessory structure or any type of human-made product would need a permit. And so it's very prescriptive and standard in building code, but it really comes down to the zoning code that we need to address later down the uses that create the more safety issues. So that's why we've been out there not doing selective enforcement, but looking at case by case as we're dealing with those codes. We're looking at the containers. And the comment earlier about seismic bracing, I don't know where that came from, but there's no seismic bracing required. It's just basically the code says you have to, if you put it in you have to put it in a safe area where it doesn't, the wind loads may be tilted over. You have to secure it down like a deck pier or something. It's something very minor, and the permit costs of that are very minor. They're like $200, $300 for a container. So it's not absorbent permit costs to pay for our time to go through to try to make these safe. And so that's where the container is. And I can provide a copy of the code section for anybody here, for the public, and I'll give it to you. Okay.
So it really hinges on
And we're not out canvassing and doing any, going out and trying to, because there's many thousands of those out there that's probably historically been out there. And so we want to address them and case by case as we become aware of them.
So you walk in on a property as an example and you find one thing, now you have an opportunity to look at the whole picture.
That's correct, a comprehensive approach.
And we can be done with it in one type of proceeding rather than these dual track proceedings that we've had all along, which is very confusing, I think, to even a property owner to figure out where they are in it.
Very complicated,
So
not efficient.
is there really a necessity on page 27 for those, been the experience of Calaveras code enforcement? Do we really need those 4 points in there at all?
Under section 8.06, 7.0.
Yeah. 710.
I suppose they can be removed if the board wishes.
Well, I was thinking, remember when we talked before about removing wordy things?
Oh, sure.
So it doesn't really enhance the overall reasoning. It just is there for verbiage, in essence. So.
Well, I don't know if it's there for verbiage, but the idea that cannabis cultivation can be subject to summary abatement is certainly controversial because it's not necessarily in and of itself hazardous, and the arguments being made there and the findings that are suggested by that language are that it is sometimes inextricably linked with hazardous activities. If the board regards that as surplusage, we can certainly remove it.
Okay. I would like to see it removed, but that's just one vote.
Supervisor Garamendi.
Thank you very much. I know this is not about containers, and Ed and I have spoken at length about containers, and we frankly disagree with each other on it, but that's fair. I do have a significant problem as we go through that, as you and I have discussed about hypocrisy. We've got a lot of them here on the school grounds, and I'd really be hesitant to ask someone to come in and pay a fine while they drive by our own violations. So I think we should get that cleared up before we go take that splinter out of our neighbor's eye. Not to be too biblical. I think we also have to think about this in terms of unintended consequences. If there's one thing we learned about the last 806 or the urgency ordinance is that stuff happens quickly, and we don't know where it always goes. So I want to make sure, Ed, that we have vetted this, as Mr. Richardson said, with interested parties, realtors, title companies, our building community. Can you tell me about how we vetted this in the community, or have we just been internal on this?
Right now, this is the process to do that, but we haven't gone out and gone with the other, like.
But you're asking us to
Right.
adopt this today, and it goes into, right?
No,
No.
no.
No?
No, this is just the introduction and waiver of reading.
I would suggest that we vet this with interested parties, because they're going to see stuff that we don't see. They could have insights to this that we're not aware of. And I hope before we bring this back to adopt it, we have a Realtors Association standing up there. You have an advisory group of builders that say, hey, this is a great idea. It'd be very good to make sure that we vet it, because they're going to see things that we just don't. Sometimes the county government, we get in our tunnel, we're heading down our path, and we may not see how this is going to impact our real estate market or other. So I hope that before we move forward on the adoption of this, that we have that endorsement of that. And you've already got some of these already in place. Your Builders Advisory Group. We've already got a professional association. So can we have that done by the time we take this up officially?
If the board elects to, we can go ahead. I think that would be a good idea.
Thank you. Then I look forward to hearing it next time.
I'm going to address a couple questions. Did this board or any member of this board direct you to make the changes to this 806 ordinance in order to finance your department?
No, I think when the ban ended, or we ran out of regulatory money, and we have literally a lot of code enforcement to do that, so we had to figure out a way to start becoming a comprehensive approach and come up with a fee study. And during the fee study, we talked about code enforcement. When we looked at the prior fee study, the code fees were not incorporated in the building fees. So we're going to be coming back with the fee study to the board to start looking at every aspect of how we're going to fund future activity in code and in building. So you're going to see an option of incorporating maybe about 25% into building fees or without. So we had to come up with some model to start funding our activities, because it was not in there in the prior fee study, as we discovered through our consultants that were doing.
And as pointed out by Ethan, code compliance has always been self-sustaining, with the exception sometimes, like we did with building, when the economy went down, we had to supplement some with general funds to keep people on board. But other than that, both building and code are self-sufficient and always have been.
Well, the study shows that code was not. It was always running a little bit in
but
the red, and building was carrying it. There was an assumption that there were fees incorporated, but subsequently have found out that it's not actually accurate. So under our new study, we're trying to correct that.
Okay. So you are trying to correct that. That's the reason for it.
And further on that, sorry to interrupt, Chair.
Yeah.
If in a code enforcement case, if it went up to, say, a notice of violation was issued and they voluntarily abated, we didn't recover any costs for that. So that's something that should have been in place long ago, that we're out that money.
Yes, and we're just trying to bring this in line.
Exactly.
Yes. The other question I have, since it was brought up, this ordinance that was brought to us did not have anything to do with odor in it. It was Supervisor Mills that brought it up earlier. So, and you tried to clarify it by saying the section about nuisances could deal with that. But specifically odors is not in what was presented to this board. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So,
That's correct.
So
And I think we could
that was
follow up with
inaccurate
them.
was what was being said. It was just brought up by Supervisor Mills, and the board hasn't given you direction on that at this point. So,
And like Ethan said, we could probably do to break out a definition and make it a little more specific.
Certainly, and it does incorporate the definition of nuisance as found in the Civil Code, which does, if I recall correctly, does deal with noxious odors, because that has typically and historically in common law been a nuisance.
Sure. I want to make sure that if we're going to deal with odor, we make sure we state that we have a right to farm county, because your goats, your pigs, your cattle have also got odor.
Yeah, as I recall in
And your chickens.
Yeah,
Want to make sure.
In Title 14 and 17, there is a provision that deals with coming to a nuisance. So if you move in next door to an existing farm, that's your problem. I think that's what it says, with reference to like hog farms and any other agricultural activity talks about that in Title 14 and 17.
And I'd like, if we're going to include odor, you should tell us what the cost will, because to come up with the special testing equipment to measure those odors, because obviously, I mean, it's pretty subjective to say what stinks and what doesn't, to say the least. So if we're going to include that, let's make sure we do it correctly, not make it a subjective application.
I'm sure there's a reasonable standard, a reasonable person standard we can incorporate.
This is Calaveras. We don't have that many reasonable people.
any other questions or comments? If not, we were looking for a motion, and exactly, you were looking for a motion to waive the reading of the ordinance.
I believe, Mr. Mills, didn't you have some edits that you wanted to recommend?
That was the edits I was talking about earlier, was
okay.
to simply, if the rest of the board was comfortable with striking under 1710A,
okay.
to try to figure out why, if that's really necessary to be there, that's those 4 points.
Okay, yeah, and then, all right, and then you had the suggestion, addition of some sort of,
A defining odor,
yeah.
that's all, just a definition is
Yeah,
all.
but I think we need to pull the board on that, whether we
wanna
want to have that included or not.
Right, that's what I was asking for.
Yeah. So, so we pull the board. Supervisor Clapp,
Yes.
Supervisor Mills,
Yes?
Supervisor Oliveira,
Yes.
Supervisor Garamendi,
No.
and I'm a no. So we have a 3-2. So,
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
I think County Council.
I just wanted to chime in to remind the board that this is the introduction and waiver. If there are substantial or significant changes to it, I know there was discussion about soliciting input from groups in the community before it comes back for adoption. If there is any substantive changes to what is presented today, it would have to come back for a new introduction and waiver. So I just wanted the board to know that if staff does go out and certainly solicit input and everything else, that it might be coming back in the form of another introduction before the adoption.
Mr. Chair, I would then say, I would make a motion not to waive the reading, but rather have to go out and get the additional input and then bring it back to us, because there may be significant input.
Any other comments on that?
I was just thinking, we sent one direction to them with this last, and I agree, though, that there may be substantive changes after you speak with other groups. Go ahead, your thought.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, after hearing Supervisor Garamendi's suggestion, I think think that might be a way to go. Be quite honest, but how do we deal with the last vote we just took?
Well, it was just a poll for direction, and certainly
It was a poll?
well, one, it was a poll that was 3-2, so certainly staff could incorporate that change in what comes back as a new introduction and waiver at a future date, in addition to any changes that would be proposed by all of these organizations.
And
I would agree with that.
And I agree. I think we'll be able to look at it its entirety again with any changes, and I would expect that there would be some substantive changes that people will look at between then and now, or now and then. So, I agree.
You agree? So I have a motion by Supervisor Garamendi. Do I have a second?
No, is that a motion?
No,
Well, he
can't do a
moved.
motion.
He would
No,
move.
can't do a
He made
motion. Can't do a motion.
To bring it back.
Just a poll, sir. Just a poll.
That was a poll for,
I mean, at this point, you can take an action, or you can just direct staff to seek additional input from various interest groups, make the modification as was previously polled, and bring back a future item, which would be an introduction and waiver of 8.06 with any modifications that were recommended.
okay, well, that being said, let's take a poll on, Supervisor Garamendi brought up, and I think Supervisor Oliveira agreed, about vetting it out to various real estate groups and so forth. So are we in favor of doing that also?
Yeah, I am.
Yes.
Yes. So we're in
Yes.
favor of that, so we're giving you direct staff to do that also. And to bring it back to us after that has all been vetted, so we can vet it here. Okay?
Excellent.
Now, do you have clear direction on that, Mr. Short? I'm glad he does.
Thank you for your presentation.
Have a great evening.
All right, now I have another poll for the board. It is 10 minutes after 7. Staff has been here, I think Madam Clerk has been here since 7 this morning. Would you like to, we have 2 items left on this agenda.
I move we suspend the remaining part of the agenda and adjourn.
That's my question. Would we like to move these to our next agenda item, our next agenda?
Meeting,
2 weeks?
the next meeting.
Yeah, the next meeting.
Not any special meeting, but to a regular meeting.
It's a regular
So you want to postpone these 2 items to the budget hearings day?
Hello? You wanna do it on-
Literally, these are not going to take very long, I don't anticipate.
That's right. The 12th is budget. So do you want to move it past budget? Well, here's what we can do. We may have a special meeting on the 30th.
We can do it then.
If we do have that special meeting, we can place it on that agenda for that special meeting. If we don't have that special meeting, then we can move it after June 12th or that week, but it's probably going to take 2 or 3 days for budgets, to the next meeting. in
So
June.
so moved.
So moved? Well,
Point of order.
It's not the 30th.
A point of order.
It's not an option.
hold on, Doris. Hang on.
Maybe the 26th.
We may have a special meeting on the 30th,
31st or the 7th. It
No,
hasn't
not
been
the 7th.
determined
or the
yet.
31st, or the 7th, not the
Yeah.
30th, excuse me.
Still waiting.
thinking we need like 30 minutes to finish this up?
Yeah, 20?
I'm just asking to poll the board. You want to continue or move it to another agenda on another day?
Mr. Chair, I would vote for listening to the last 2 remaining items today.
Supervisor Garamendi?
Let's go. Let's go. Let's
So
go.
now we want to go. Okay. I just thought I'd ask because I was asked to ask.
Mr. Chair, I believe we had a point of order.
Yes, sir. What's your point of order?
Well, now that you've decided to stay, I just wanted to make sure that I got 2 shots at the podium. One for this afternoon and one for the next meeting. Now that you've decided to stay, I'm not concerned about it.
Okay.
Thank
Moving on. Madam Clerk.
Item 28 is from the Board of Supervisors to correct a clerical error related to the term expirations for 3 members of the Murphy Cemetery District Board of Trustees based on the clerk's recommendation determined during the review of the district. So it was determined that there are 3 members on the Murphy Cemetery District Board that have terms stated to expire on 12/31/19, and they should really expire on 12/31/20. I believe that when we converted into our new module for managing the boards, committees, and commissions, I believe there was just a clerical error when these term expiration dates were brought forward. So this would just correct it, and it would correct it would stagger the membership terms appropriately.
Any board comments or questions? Any public comments? Seeing none?
So moved.
A motion by Supervisor Garamendi,
Second.
second by Oliveira. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Madam Clerk, on item 29.
It's okay. Sorry. I'll let you get away with it.
Item 29 is from the Board of Supervisors to adopt a resolution disbanding the Calaveras County Commission on Aging. So as part of the review of all the committees and commissions, as the board directed me to do, I have been looking at each one, and it has been determined that the Commission on Aging, which was formed in the 1970s to advise the Board of Supervisors about issues and needs of the county seniors, has not really been functioning in the role as it was created. They have been, over the years, focusing more of their efforts on hosting events and fundraising, things that bring awareness for seniors, and not advising the Board of Supervisors. It's the clerk's opinion that their role as advisory to the board has kind of taken a back seat and been more non-existent, and that the good work that they are doing to promote the welfare and benefit of seniors in our community is better done through a 501c3. So they have partnered with Common Ground to do some of the things that they want to do to serve as outreach to seniors in our community. As a result, many of the members have resigned. So out of a 15-member board, they currently have 4 members. So it takes time and money to advertise for vacancies, process applications, staff time to try to find out if they're having meetings. And I think that for the return on the investment, the board is not getting really what they are looking for. It doesn't mean that the people who are involved or have been involved with the Commission on Aging are not able to come to the board. They can still come to the board. They can still ask the board and make recommendations individually as to things that they would like to see you either support or oppose. So they still have a vehicle for having their voice heard. It's just not in the capacity as appointed by the Board of Supervisors.
Mr. Chair. Yeah. Madam Clerk, is this a complete separate organization from the Area 12 Commission on Aging?
Yes, it absolutely is, and it is not an organization or a group that we are required by statute to have.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Mills?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Any other board questions, comments? If not, public comments.
Bonnie Newman from Double Springs. I attended the Commission on Aging for a couple of months. I did not know that they were not having success in what they were doing. I would suggest this commission not be eliminated. We have too many seniors in this county. I think I heard 30%, 40% are seniors or some number like that. And knowing how the IHSS commission committee was almost disbanded a few years ago. I'd like to ask you, how many referrals have each of you gentlemen made from your district for people to come and sit on this commission? Because if this commission is not doing its job, it's probably because there's not enough people to take on the task. Do they understand what their job is? I would suggest they receive a letter from the Board of Supervisors indicating that there's contemplation to disband this commission unless it lives up to its expectation. Its expectation is also that you folks would be appointing people, recruiting people from each of your individual districts to sit on this board. If there's 15 slots, each of you should have 3 people from your district sitting on this board. They would need direction of what their expectations are, and if they're having a hard time with the quorum, suggest that every other month be a meeting date rather than every month, because that can be rather tedious. And if they've been spinning their wheels trying to raise money, rather than doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is advising you on the issues of seniors, and that's just what I'm interpreting, because I don't have all of their bylaws and what their expectations are. I just think it would be short-sighted and be pulling the rug out from a bunch of people that would and could serve on this committee that aren't being asked to or given the opportunity or informed that this commission is in jeopardy. Because I've attended 2 meetings and I had no idea there was contemplation for this commission to be disbanded.
As a member of the Commission on Aging and on a medical leave of absence, we had people that dropped off because they were required by law. They couldn't serve anymore. January, February, March, April, those 4 months, I came to this podium and asked the supervisors to please look in your districts and find people to serve on the Commission on Aging. We haven't gotten anything. Diane has spent money on advertising, and we can't keep pouring money down a rat hole. So I would once again ask you to please take a look at your districts and see who could be candidates and see how many people you have from your district currently on the Commission on Aging. Yes, there has been a turn. Everything Diane has said is absolutely factual. But we haven't been able to have a quorum. And I've been asking for 4 months. So I would like for you to make it a priority to find people in your districts so that they could serve. Right now, we only have 4 people. And we can't hold any meetings. So I would strongly urge you to take a look in your districts and see who possible candidates are, because it's 3 people from each supervisorial district. Thank you.
Chair, I attended the meetings on the Commission for Aging when they were either in Valley Springs or in San Andreas. I actually attended one in Angels Camp. Their bylaws required you can only be on it for 3 years, and so Rex, Bertha, and some of the other main people actually are off now because they termed out. They can only be for 3 years, I believe it was. And they were a nonprofit now, and they were basically going that direction at that time. So I would be really at this point, I think it's defunct. It's basically non-existing, really.
We need to finish public comments first. Is there any other public comments? Okay, seeing none, bring it back to the board. Okay. Okay.
I just want to make a comment that I was one of the commissioners. I think it's 2 3-year terms, Clyde, but it doesn't matter. At this point, we have Area 12 Agency on Aging that can come and present senior needs to the board. I think they're doing surveys and they're doing everything our Commission on Aging could have done. It's my understanding, due to the bylaws, that's pretty much the only mandate that we had, was come and tell you what seniors need in this county. So for myself, I will take the unpopular stand of saying I think the commission could be disbanded and we're not going to lose anything from the way it's mandated right now. But that doesn't preclude the board from reforming the group in the future and perhaps giving us a mandate that encompasses a little more meat, for lack of a better word. So that gives us something to do, because quite frankly, just coming, I go to 2 commissions on aging and I can bring you legislation from Amador County if you want to know what's going on in senior legislation. That's my comment.
Any other public comments? All right, seeing none, I will close public comments. Supervisor Clapp, you finished with your comments?
Yes.
Supervisor Olivera, your light's on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Clerk, have we advertised this in our required manners and procedures as far as these vacancies on this board?
We do an annual notice of vacancies that's posted at all the branch libraries. That meets our requirement for the annual advertisement. Anytime that somebody resigns, I have to run an ad in the paper, and then we would collect applications just like we would with any other group. I've attended several of the Commission on Aging meetings over the last year or two, where we've, had conversations about what their governing documents have described as what their purpose is. And the consensus that I received from the group was, yeah, they wanted to advise the board, but they really wanted to do other work that they thought was necessary in the community. And I am totally supportive of the fact that the works that they want to do are needed in the community. I am just not sure that being the county-appointed Commission on Aging is the vehicle. We have, over the last 4 years, we have had a couple of meetings with representatives of the group, we being myself, County Counsel's office, the CAO's office, the Auditor Controller's office, and we have expressed our concern over the activities as they are not what has been outlined, and have urged the group over the years to become a 501c3, to partner with a 501c3, to do something that would enable them to shed the legal restrictions that the Brown Act and the FPPC have in place for them, and allow them to do the things that they want to do, because they are good things. Nobody is saying that the things that the group was focusing on were not priorities. They just were not priorities as far as advising the Board of Supervisors.
Madam Clerk, you said there's 4 members that are dovetailed, if you will, into common ground?
No. No, they currently, out of 15 members, they have 4,
Right.
one of which is on medical leave.
I understand.
So that's 3 that they have. What they're doing is that if they want to do fundraising, they want to collect money, they want to do any of those things, they are partnering with Common Ground to do that, because they can't do that with us.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
I would also just echo, putting on my old hat now, as former Area Agency on Aging Director in Kings and Tulare County. The Commission on Aging definitely can fill a critical role, but I think what the clerks proposed is actually a better operational structure. Most of the time there are nonprofits for the exact reasons that the clerk stated. It's a better opportunity to do fundraising. It's a better opportunity to go after some of the grants and linking with Common Grounds or other senior service organizations, I think is I would expect it to actually grow and be able to tap into some of the resources available at the state level and bring in some of the funding and be a bigger player than being a particular 15-member board. That's a huge number to try and fill when those boards are just really tough to get people on. I just wanted to add that comment. I normally don't say anything on those, but the Commission on Aging and Senior Services is always something near to my heart, and I think doing a nonprofit structure for a Commission on Aging actually makes a lot of sense.
Council, your lights on. So, that being said, do I have a motion?
I would move the item to adopt a resolution.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, next item. Announcements.
Supervisor announcements. In compliance with AB 1234, chaptered as Government Code Section 53232.3D, board members shall provide brief reports on meetings they attended at the expense of the local agency at the next regular meeting of the legislative body. This report is required to include meetings attended for which there has been expense reimbursement, such as mileage, meals, lodging, etc., but may also, at the board member's discretion, include any other meeting attended by the supervisor on behalf of the county.
I will start with Supervisor Clapp.
I've attended no meetings that cost the county any, so I have nothing to report out on.
Supervisor Mills.
Yesterday, I attended the U.S. Forest Service General Management Review, and in the course of that discussion, it was determined that 25% of all of the money expended by the Forest Service on a timber sale is spent by people that walk around with a can of paint spraying a tree. I thought that was rather unusual, and because there's now a desire to deconstruct some of the policies of the U.S. Forest Service, they're working towards a goal where the contractor is going to be told, this is how we want that plot to look, and it will be up to you to make it look that way when it's done. And that's the bottom line, put the paint can away. So I thought that was a very big step on their part to be willing to even discuss it. But it was a great conversation. If anybody wants details, come see me.
Supervisor Oliveira.
Thank you, Chair. I attended our board meeting last Tuesday and then went directly to Sacramento to attend the CSAC legislative session. That was a 2-day session, Wednesday and Thursday. Had some wonderful workshops up there. We discussed several issues, got the state's perspective on different issues coming up before the state. Also had to meet with our 58 counties that were represented there. We discussed areas around the marijuana new programs on state level. We also discussed the new restructuring of forest health and management with CAL FIRE and state agencies, and had input from our other fellow persons representing the state county-wise. We did attend some workshops on land management and transportation. We did have an opportunity to have a luncheon meeting with Governor Brown, who explained the pitfalls of our new budget and the good things and the bad things. Very exciting. We were very happy to represent Calaveras County there. And I must note, they know who Calaveras County is, and that's good. I'm not going to steal CIO Lutz thunder, but we did attend a couple of issues there together, a couple of workshops, and had a great dinner. So that's all I have. I take that back. I did attend our meeting with Supervisor Topanelli at the Central Sierra Child Support Agency. And once again, that is an agency that's doing a great job. They are in the 92% bracket, I believe, for collections, and they're doing just a great job. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Garamendi.
Well, in accordance with AB 1, 2, 3, 4, I have nothing to report. In the interest of time, I'll keep my report short. The governor didn't invite me to lunch, but I did get to spend 4 fun days at Frog Jump, and I'll take the corn dog. It was great. So that's all I have to report, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and I have nothing to report at this time, in the interest of time. CAO Lutz?
I like the corn dog, because you can't go to the fair without the corn dog. I'll be really brief, but I thought it would be worth mentioning. I also had a chance to go with Supervisor Olvera to the CSAC Legislative Conference. Something that I think was particularly important that we're watching closely is the governor's executive order on some of the forest health and what we're looking at as coming out in the May revise, so we don't miss any opportunities. The governor has included about $96 million additional dollars in the May revise, and within that there's a number of buckets. Relevant, certainly CAL FIRE got about $26.8 million of that to create, at this point, six crews who are going to be going across the state to be doing prescribed burns throughout the year. And why this is relevant, prescribed burns, is that this crew will not be pulled for forest fires. They will be full-time doing nothing but prescribed burning. They're also allocating quite a bit of money, about $30 million, to Sierra Nevada Conservancy for watershed improvements. I also am looking closely at a couple of the areas where Department of Conservation is getting funds for local capacity building, particularly on trying to develop some programs to utilize wood, to promote the use of wood, and to really what I would characterize as some early steps of potentially rebuilding some of that timber industry that I know Supervisor Mills was just discussing. There's also going to be some money coming through GoBiz, which is the Governor's Economic Development Office, that would be for locals, for forest product manufacturers. Obviously, on the economic development side, we'll be looking closely at any of those pieces. And on the OES side, looking for ways that we can be working and helping to direct resources to some of our forest management, particularly as everything coalesces with tree mortality and just the increased or the new norm that we live in the state, and the fire danger.
County Council? Madam Clerk? No? Okay, that being said, we will go back to public comments and finish what we didn't finish this morning.
Well, certainly worth waiting for. 2 items I wanted to bring up in public comments this morning. We didn't have time. One is the GIS system. This is a topic that I brought up countless times to the board. The GIS system represents a repository for a lot of information regarding nuisances and everything in the county. So far, we have not seen that be made available to the public. I understand that some of the information that may be deposited in the GIS system would only be suitable for department heads and board members and staff. In talking with some of the people who actually wrote this program, it is possible to create portals for citizens to go in, and you can control the information that they get. The information that we're concerned about is, of course, we don't want citizens wandering over to their neighbor's property to see what's going on there in case it may affect their property. We'd like to have it safe where they can look at the GIS system, find out, first of all, for instance, there might be a pot grow there. It may have been abated. Has environmental health been there to clear the property? Are there any chemicals that the property owners downstream, downwind, and downhill should be aware of? Those are safe things to do. With the topographic contour overlay, they can make their own assessment as to whether their property is in danger from anything. I'm not saying that everyone has it, but it gives them a chance to select testing points on their property to make sure nothing is migrating onto their property. So I would reiterate my request to the chairman that we do something about GIS and get it available to citizens, whether on the county website or not. The second item goes back to last year when then Chairman Olivera decided to push down the road the dispensary ordinance, which was on the agenda. That's 1791. It had come to the board from the Planning Commission where it had been reviewed, had public review, and there were a lot of changes that we wanted to make to that. Since dispensaries represent commercial cultivation, we feel that it's vital that we look at the dispensary ordinance and see if somehow that violates the spirit of 1795. All I can say is dispensaries grow their own marijuana. From what I hear, liquor stores do not make their own beer, wine, and liquor. They buy it from someone else and resell it, and the county gets taxed off of that. So we feel it can be handled in much the same manner, where we can control the indoor growing or outdoor growing, and 1791 has no controls over cultivation for dispensaries. So we've already been through this. We would like to have it brought up again in the future and have some public opinion or public input on the value and how to control dispensaries in Calaveras County. Thank you.
I want to thank Supervisor Clapp, Supervisor Mills, and Supervisor Tofinelli for the direction that they've taken this board. I totally appreciate what they did in voting for the ban, and I will never be able to repay you. I would never take on doing what you guys do, all 5 of you taking on the responsibility of what you've taken on, and thank you very much.
Other public comments?
Joan Wilson, District 1. It was a beautiful day today. We all spent it inside. Oh my. But it was. We've had a beautiful spring in this beautiful county. It's been a long day. You gentlemen have had a lot on your plates, and you have done well with it. We had a fair. It was wonderful to take my granddaughter to the fair. I had a great time. This county makes me proud when it comes to fairs. And that's part of spring, isn't it? Spring is a beautiful time. And with spring comes allergies. I wish you all an allergy-free day. Allergies, the pollen is flying, smells come along with spring. Flowers smell, they smell wonderful. Horses smell, some people don't like that, some people do, some people don't care. Cows, same thing. Garlic smells, onions smell. Some people don't like the smells, some people do. Some people can smell those like 2 cities away in some parts of the state. And marijuana does smell too, yes it does. And some people like it and some people don't. Some people don't realize that it's almost exactly the same smell that you can smell outside of a local grocery store. But that one doesn't bother them. Okay. Homeless. The homeless people are coming up into the mountains because it is a good place to stay. And we've talked about tiny homes. Maybe that might be a way to help with them. Affordable housing. I've had people that I know that have recently been looking for housing, and they're going, oh my gosh, rents are through the roof. You might as well live in the Bay Area. But it's a wonderful, beautiful day. And it's going to be a beautiful evening, and I hope you all enjoy yourselves. And I hope that everyone takes time to reflect on the different smells, the different flavors, the different people that make up our county, and reflect on what direction you want it to go in. Thank you.
It's been a long day. I saw this flyer, and I hope Mr. Clapp doesn't leave the boardroom while I talk about this. It has, and I'm sure most of the people in District 5 have already seen this, and about the alleged elder abuse and the trial that's going to be in September. There's just no way I can support you, Mr. Clapp. You have run amok ever since you've been on here. One meeting you said all the employees at the county were no good, and then several months later you said they were really good. I mean, who's on first? I want to thank Supervisor Garamendi and Supervisor Oliveira for all of their participation in the board meetings and giving good input, asking really good questions so that we can improve what goes on in this county. I never professed to be the most popular person in town, and that's just the way it is, you know. I speak myself, and I guess it's because I came out of Boston, and I came out of Boston Democratic politics, and so I do speak my mind. But I can't support Supervisor Tofinelli or Supervisor Mills, not because of the marijuana thing. I don't smoke marijuana, I don't buy it, I don't sell it, I don't do any of that. I'm retired law enforcement, and I don't buy into that program. But I'm disappointed that you three played the bait and switch game. That's, to me, that's just totally unconscionable. You lead these folks down, and I'm not one way or the other about it, but you lead them down the garden path, and then you just cut them off at the knees. And to me, that is really disturbing. I would never do that to anybody. And why you three choose to do that is totally beyond me. Maybe you're sitting up there and you're counting votes in the audience. I don't know. But that's all I have to say.
Other public comments?
Jason Campbell, District 5. I got word earlier today, I don't know if you guys are aware or not, but there's an online complaint form for code violations. Every time we try to submit one, it gives us a server error. So I'd just like to put that on record, and hopefully somebody can look into that.
Stop this time, please, because I want to ask, you went on the county website to
File an online complaint,
Okay.
code violation complaint, and when we try to submit them, all we receive is server error.
Can you? Okay, he's checking it. Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
My other, let's see, sorry, what's the other one? I got some time, it'll come back to me. Oh, I wanted to thank the three of you for all the extra time I'm going to have. And I'll let you use my imagination, or your imaginations, on what I plan on doing with that extra time. And my third point is, Board Chair, I was wondering, do you think that we might be able to have a civil conversation this time about the board rules and procedures? Maybe you won't raise your voice at me. get upset. I'm trying to follow the rules. I want to follow the rules in here. I want to follow the rules out in public. So I think we need some more clarity on what's allowed and what's not allowed in here. One day we're allowed to clap, one day we're not. One day we're allowed to bring guitars and sing songs, which I have no problem with. It's very entertaining. One day we're allowed to bring signs, one day we're not, depending on the subject matter of the signs. We really need to know what's really going on out here. Like I said, I don't like the way that I was treated during the meeting today. I think it was very smart and somewhat sneaky on your part to call me out during a break on a rule, and so that wasn't on record. We don't need selective enforcement here. We need enforcement evenly across the board for all rules, regulations, laws, no matter what it is. Board rules and procedures, cultivation, murder, speeding, it doesn't matter. In code violations, enforce the rules evenly across the board for everybody. I'll take my last 30 seconds to observe a moment of silence for the travesties that are going on in this county. Thank you for your dedication, your hard work, and your time spent here. I know it's been a long day. Have a good night.
Any other public comments? Seeing none, we'll stand adjourned.